Somebody out there must have wished upon a star because it's time for another brand new episode of Magic by Design. If you're an old friend of the show or listening for the first time, thanks so much for tuning in. We are delighted to have you on board. My name is Ken, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host / brother, Garrett. Gar, how are you?
Hey, how we doing? People are wrong.
Oh, straight out the gate.
My hot take immediately coming out of this podcast, based off recent episodes of Magic by Design and films we've watched, is that too many people have nostalgia for Emperor's New Groove, and not enough people have nostalgia for Atlantis or Treasure Planet. Coming straight in with hot takes.
Ooh.
Of course, Lilo and Stitch, it doesn't even count. It's the best film of all time. But the broader B-tier Disney films that people don't really remember. Dinosaur, just throw it out the window. No one cares. Nobody likes Dinosaur.
Yeah.
And for good reason.
It's strange how most of the films of this era have been forgotten to time.
Well, like, in that tier, I think Emperor's New Groove has the most, like, groundswell of people who still like it. Treasure Planet is probably second. You see some Treasure Planet love, but not a ton of it. And Atlantis is just a film nobody talks about as well. But it's unfair, because it's actually quite a good film. So, these are the weird post-Renaissance films that people have forgotten, or have now only very small subsects of fans. Except for Emperor's New Groove, which I think is a larger subsect of fans, for reasons passing comprehension.
Okay, good start.
But Emperor's New Groove is clearly my new Aristocats. I've moved on from wearing Aristocats to Emperor's New Groove. Like that's
you've grown throughout the podcast.
It's the natural progression, and this episode, of course, is the final episode of the Disney Young Boy Adventure trilogy. Actually, not really Young Boy, more teen adventure trilogy, which is Black Cauldron, Atlantis, and Treasure Planet.
I've never heard that said before. Is that something you've just made up?
Yes, but I think these films couple together in a way that makes sense. Like the biggest flaw with the Treasure Planet, as we get straight into it before you can even finish the introduction.
That's fine, we're into it now.
Is that Atlantis exists. That's the biggest problem with Treasure Planet, is Atlantis exists.
I was just going to say that there's a direct comparison and it doesn't come out favourably, but I don't think that's fair either.
If you had never seen Atlantis and you watched Treasure Planet, I think you'd enjoy Treasure Planet a great deal.
Yeah.
Similarly, if you'd watched Treasure Planet first, then watched Atlantis second, you'd probably have a poorer opinion of Atlantis, because they're very similar films.
Yeah.
And both of them are very competent, good, fun adventure films. Again, not to bury the lead before we can finish the introduction, but it doesn't help that these films have been released so close together. They're it's only Lilo and Stitch in between them, buffering them, and it doesn't help that they are very similar, going for a very similar tone and a very similar audience and a very similar concept.
Pretty much. It's that finding a lost world or adventure, the unlikely hero, and all these kind of things. Like, I have a vague awareness of the characters in this movie, but I've never seen it before the podcast. I know you've seen it before as well.
Yeah, I did a random watch of it one night. I don't even remember what led me to doing a random watch of Treasure Planet, but I did a random watch of Treasure Planet. And I remember liking it less when I watched it then than I did now. So that's a plus for it.
It's grown on you. Until Disney Plus, you either had to order it or wait for it to come on TV.
Or find it via perfectly legal means on the internet, yes.
And for a long time, Disney weren't keen to put their movies on TV that much.
Especially this, because this is a flop. Like, this is one of the bigger Disney flops in a while. Like, this is a floppity flop. Like, they envisaged Treasure Planet being a franchise.
Yeah.
And they were just like, no.
I wasn't inclined to buy this on home video or pirate it, because I'm a good boy. So I hadn't... Pirate, get it? I just got that.
Gar, because we're pirates in space.
Yeah. So I didn't really get around to watching it, but then when we started the podcast, I said, may as well wait for the podcast, you know? I can watch it anytime I want now. It's at my fingertips. But...
Yeah, you can watch it again if you want. Or you can play one of the, I think, 2 video games that were made based on it.
Jumping into the background, Gar, this film is directed by Ron Clements and John Musker of Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and Hercules fame.
Yeah, it's an A-team. Those are the heavy hitters of the studio. And this is their first film in a while as well.
Yeah.
So,
and as we know from previous podcasts, because we've touched on it, they were trying to get this film made for some time. They first pitched the project back in 1985, then again in 1989, following the release of The Little Mermaid, pitched a third time following the release of Aladdin. So after each tentpole success, they're like, can we make our movie now?
Can you please... We've given you 3 beloved monstrous hits that still live on in the hearts of people to this day. Can you please let us make our Space Pirates movie? I know you just made Muppet Treasure Island, so we've already tread the ground of Treasure Island, and they made a Treasure Island film back in the 60s as well. So
50.
So this is their 3rd time doing Treasure Island. And again, Muppet's Treasure Island was 6 years. This was 2002? Yeah, 6 years before this. So it's like Muppet Treasure Island is still relatively fresh in the mind, which, by the way, Love Let Us Here in Muppet Treasure Island. Great song. Love Let Us Here. Back where we belong. Will we get to Muppets films eventually on this podcast?
Well, They are in the Disney canon now, Gar, so...
When we run out of animated things to watch, we have to move on to the Muppets.
Yeah, why not?
Which, by the way, the Muppet Show dropped on Disney Plus this week. Have you watched any of it?
I have not. I've been saving it.
Fake Muppet fan. I've watched 5 episodes.
Which of the two of us has their own Muppet?
That's true. You do have your own Muppet.
Where
is your Muppet?
He's in the wardrobe in my old bedroom.
Creepy.
Just waiting.
Yes. But Muppet Show holds up so well. Like, so well. It's so funny.
Well, I think that vaudeville thing is timeless. It's dated in a sense. Has a very specific sense of time and place, but also I suppose it's that broad slapstick humor that can apply in any.
Yeah, I saw someone
era.
tweet that like the Muppets is distilled down to wordplay and chaos, and I'm like, yeah, it's wordplay and chaos, and that's timeless. You can't go wrong with wordplay and chaos because they're like, witty wordplay. It's very good. And I watched 5 episodes, and it's like that's a very good observation. Person who I don't remember, but yeah, the Muppet Show. God, what a great show that is. It's so funny. And like it's legitimately still funny. And I hate Saturday Night Live. I think it's terrible and it's never been funny. It's an entire like 70-year run or whatever.
I think if there's anything worth watching, you just watch it on YouTube now.
Yeah. So why has the Saturday Night Live still persisted, but the Muppet Show hasn't? When the Muppet Show is much better. Also, Disney, bring back the Muppet Show. Come on.
Yeah, they gave us Muppets Now, which was somewhat of a Muppet Show successor, but not quite.
And then there's that web show that I watched 1 episode of. What was that called? Was that Muppets Now?
Yeah.
The recent one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I know that they did a Disney Channel version of the Muppet Show briefly, didn't they?
Muppets Tonight, yeah.
Yeah, so, like, Muppets
With
Now...
Clifford as the host, weirdly.
Yeah, but come on, it's Kermit. Yeah, Muppets. Muppets are great. Disney, stop making the Muppets irrelevant. What are you doing?
Stop sleeping on the Muppets.
Let the Muppets do a Marvel film.
Yeah.
Like, let them do a Marvel film. Muppets should be in the MCU. They should do that crossover. Or Muppets Star Wars. How have they not done it? Like, a Muppet Star Wars film would be very good. They would be very good with Star Wars.
They've done all that stuff with Lego, so it's like Muppet Star Wars, Muppet Iron Man, Muppet Captain America.
Muppet Moana.
It's endless.
Muppet Lilo and Stitch, which actually would be quite easy. Stitch as a puppet would be great. That's what the live action remake should be. It should just be a Muppet movie.
Did you see the posters they did for the launch? They did Muppet versions of Disney Plus shows.
Yeah.
Very funny.
I would watch Muppet Musical, the Muppet Show. Got there in the end. But yes, me mentioning Muppet Treasure Island has led us onto a Muppet tangent, which will bring us back to them trying to make Treasure Planet. Can continue.
So Jeffrey Katzenberg wasn't interested after the post-Aladdin pitch. They went over his head to Roy E. Disney, who backed them and made it known to Michael Eisner that he wanted them to greenlight the project. So they were given permission to begin development on Treasure Planet when they concluded work on Hercules. So from the initial 1985 pitch, principal animation for the film began in 2000, 15 years later.
Yeah, and even like from the approved in 95, it took another 5 years to start making it.
Well, they had to finish Hercules and then there was pre-development, so I imagine... Yeah, the timeline fits quite snugly there. They began with roughly 350 crew members working on it. In 2002, producer Roy Connolly estimated that there were around 1,027 crew members listed in the screen credits, with about 400 artists and computer artists, about 150 musicians, and another 200 technologists.
That's a lot of people for a film that doesn't seem like it should need... Actually, there are some 3D scenes in this film that are like stunning and like really detailed, particularly the spaceport at the start of the film when they're like zooming in on the spaceport and they show the full bustling spaceport moon thingy with all the stuff happening before they close in on like the more standard regular 2D shot, and like that is like extremely impressive. It looks very, very good. It looks very good to 2021 eyes, which is rare for these films in their 3D. And like this film starts with 3D because it's like 3D space fights.
I think the spaceport is one of the parts of the film where they managed to successfully blend the 2D and 3D. It does have a distinctly 3D and graphical look, but
and then it zooms in, into the, and it feels seamless. It doesn't feel like an hour suddenly jarringly moving from 3D to 2D.
And this film took a bit of a novel approach in that all the elements besides the characters are 3D. Mm-hmm. So like when they interact with them, they paint over them in a kind of a 2D effect, but like it's mostly 3D sets with 2D characters, which is difficult to pull off.
And like I'll be honest, I wouldn't be like it looks distinctly different from Disney's films, which it kind of doesn't. But on the flip side, I would also be like, oh god, that's an experiment gone terribly wrong. It just looks like a Disney film, which I think is a success for these kind of things. Then
at a budget of 140 million, that's 203.5 million in 2021. It was the most expensive animated movie ever produced at the time.
And flop.
Yeah, Disney seem to have broken their own record multiple times over the years in this regard. As you said, financial flop, making less than its budget at the box office, approximately 110 million. That's 160 million. So you're looking at approximately a 45 million loss there.
That's not counting marketing either. So
yeah, it came up against stiff competition in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Die Another Day, and The Santa Claus 2.
Oh yeah, Tim Allen killed it.
Critics praised the film's animation. They thought it was beautiful in places, as you referenced there.
They're right, it is beautiful in places.
The fast pace and humour, but criticised the characters' needless space setting and failure to capture the appeal of the source material.
What do they mean, needless space setting?
Some critics thought they just should have done a straight Treasure Island.
Why? They already did it. Like, I don't know. Go have some fun and do weird shit in space. Why not? Why would you not do that?
To your point, Gar, as you said, this is the third Disney adaptation of the novel, following Treasure Island in 1950 and Muppet Treasure Island only 6 years before.
Yeah, so you might as well do something different. And the book exists. People could read the book. Why not do something weird and wacky with the book? Treasure Island in space. Go for it.
That's why I mention it, because they've done a straight adaptation. They've done a Muppet adaptation. So when they're doing it, again, especially so soon after Muppet Treasure Island, you're going to want to change it up.
Especially doing it in an animated film, where like the boundaries of what you can do with it are basically limitless. It's basically whatever your imagination can come up with for Treasure Island is what you can do with Treasure Island. So why not do something weird and wonderful and something that just could not be done in live action at the time, and probably could be done in live action now and probably will be, knowing them. But which again, like Atlantis, I know this film, humongous flop, so maybe they won't be like, let's redo Treasure Planet because it was a humongous flop. But again, similar to Atlantis, it would be a very good live action film.
I think they might get there eventually because they're doing all the A and B tier now. So they're going to get there eventually. They're like, okay, we've remade them all. May as well go for the ones that nobody liked and try to redeem them.
Especially as like Disney Plus ones or something. Actually, and there's actually a big reason why they might not. This film is basically Star Wars.
Yeah, and they own Star Wars now. So.
Even the music is like, which actually really good score. I like the score of this film a lot. But it feels very Star Wars, like top to bottom. And that, like, Jim Hawkins is basically Anakin Skywalker from that year before he went psycho and murdered some kids. That cocky protagonist. He probably has a little more heart than Anakin did, but it very much feels like an early 2000s protagonist where he's kind of cool and cocky and a little bit edgy, and it's Star Wars.
Wisecracks.
Yeah, this whole thing is Star Wars, and it's probably better than half the Star Wars films, so it has that going for it. But
yeah, I think Star Wars has a 50% hit rate.
Like, this film is better than all of the Star Wars prequels. So
ooh, heavy shot.
Yeah, those films are bad.
I like The Phantom Menace.
No, it's bad. Actually, The Phantom Menace is the best of them, but the rest of them are terrible.
Gar, as we said, one of the film's goals was to blend the different mediums of animation into one film and have a seamless finish. So you have the 3D backgrounds, the 3D models, and the 2D models. And I think there was points where that was successful, as you said, the spaceport being a prime example, but there were other times where it stuck out.
And I'd never say it's seamless. Like, that sequence where they're coming in the spaceport, which I think looks really good, and it's like really detailed, but it's 3D animation. I think that's the 3D bit. Just like they open the film on like those space wars and with those big spaceships and panning around, like, and I love the idea of these like space pirate ships. I think they're so cool. Like, just pirate ships in space. That's a cool idea. Get out of here, these people being like, you shouldn't have put this in space. That's
a good point. The crew operated on a 70-30 law implemented by Ron Clements. So he said that the artwork should be 70% traditional and 30% sci-fi. So in other films, they might have gone the other direction where it's like 70% sci-fi, like cold, hard metal or whatever.
But then there's just the pirate flag on top or something. Yeah.
So this is like stuff that looks analog, but it's of space origin. So it has like advanced technology integrated into something that looks old, which is very cool.
Yeah, I think that ended up being like I'm not sure, was it the intent to kind of maintain the more of a pirate aesthetic than a space aesthetic? But I think that worked out very well for the film.
Yeah, I think early on they had a more, I suppose, how would you describe it?
Star Wars.
Yeah.
It was even more Star Wars at the start.
Yeah, more alien than Treasure Island, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and there's not like that many aliens in this movie. There's some, but
they fell into that trap that you said last week you didn't like, that they made them all a bit ugly.
Yeah.
Whereas in Lilo and Stitch, they're quite appealing.
But I guess there's supposedly they're meant to be ugly, because like there's that one alien who cuts the the rope of that dude. Names, I'm terrible with names in these films. This is the reason you have Wikipedia in front of you, Ken, because you can remember it was Mr. Arrow who had his rope cut, and Scroop. I don't think Scroop is ever named in this film. If he is, I don't remember. But Scroop is the
Mr. Tarantula Scorpion.
Yes, who cuts the rope? Who looks like the most? But like he's meant to be like sinister looking, and he looks sinister, so I'm okay with that.
Musker and Clements wanted to be able to move the camera around a lot in the mode of Steven Spielberg and James Cameron. So actually, in the end, the delay in production was beneficial because the technology could catch up with their vision. The animators took Deep Canvas, the technology as we know, which was developed initially for Tarzan, and came up with a process that they called virtual sets, wherein they created entire 360-degree sets before they began staging scenes, combining this process with traditionally drawn characters to achieve a painted image with depth perception. I think that's, as you say, Gar, the times when this works, it really works, but when it doesn't, it is very jarring.
I don't think it's jarring. I just think it's not like it's not the thing they wanted it to be, in that it's not this seamless thing where you don't notice the difference. But I think it always looks fine.
And the thing is, if you're making comparisons to Atlantis does do that quite seamlessly.
I would have said Atlantis, but Atlantis like sticks out like a sore thumb when they do 3D scenes though.
Yeah.
Like when they're panning around the submarine, it's like, oh look, it's the 3D time.
I think maybe they used it less, so it stuck
Yeah,
out.
Atlantis I think is a lot more traditionally animated.
Fun fact here, Gar. In order to test how a computer-generated body part, specifically John Silver's cyborg arm, would mesh with traditional animation, the crew took a clip of Captain Hook from Peter Pan and replaced him with a cyborg arm. So
nice. I'd watch that film. Cyborg Hook?
That exists somewhere
I guess
out there.
this is that film in some ways, but...
One of the things that Connolly, the producer, noted as well was that they wanted to create a space world that was warm and had life to it, much more than you'd normally think of in a science fiction film, as opposed to stainless steel blue, smoke, kind of inky blacks. That's the one thing if you want me to describe the color palette or the feeling of this film, there is a lot of warmth. Like there's a lot of oranges, reds. The
very
characters,
homely.
Yeah.
Even like the opening like sequence of this film takes place on like just a regular tavern that just happens to be in space.
Yeah.
Which I kind of like. You know, like the cantina in Star Wars is very like, when they pan through that scene, it's like, look at all these mysterious aliens, and this is very space-like, as opposed to here when this is just a tavern that happens to be in space. Which I think is quite cool.
The character animation in this is quite, especially when it comes to the humans, I think it's somewhere between the sophistication you would see in like Beauty and the Beast, but also the simplicity you would see in the likes of maybe Atlantis or Lilo and Stitch. Actually, it reminds me most closely of The Little Mermaid, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's very Clemens and Musker. I think the character, particularly the designs of the main character, like Jim Hawkins, I think is a very distinct and memorable looking character, as opposed to the character in Atlantis, whose I don't even remember. Milo, who's like a very bland looking character when you think about it, and he's kind of meant to be because he's like a dork, so he's not meant to be this like dashing, charming hero in the same way that Jim Hawkins ends up being. But I think Jim Hawkins is a memorable character. I think Silver is a very memorable character design with his weird face. There's a lot going on in his face.
Yeah, I think he's supposed to be one of those animal type characters as well, not a dog or a cat like the other characters are. Something like a sea creature to me, or something like that.
Which maybe, yeah, that's what they're going for. And like Long John Silver's what he's meant to be. So
yeah, and he's part machine as well. I liked the way like you don't notice it, but sometimes if you look closely, you see that, you know, the piece on the side of his head is working, or his arm or his leg, you can see the workings. So like it's something that goes in the background, but if you pay attention to it, it's just really intricate.
It's that attention to detail that like they could have just made his arm silver, and there you go.
Yeah, so it's always moving and it's alive. So I really liked that.
So is he called Silver because he is a cyborg, or is it just a cruel twist of irony that he's called Silver and happens to be half silver?
Perhaps he adopted the name afterwards.
So what's his shoot name, Ken? What's his real name? Brother
Smith.
Right. Well,
like most people of the time.
Yes, most people in space during that era.
This is a science fiction adaptation of Robert Louis Stevenson's 1883 adventure novel. I didn't
read, by the way. I forgot that was a whole thing we used to do, where I used to pretend I'd at least try and read the book, and we'd thrown that one out the window long ago.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I'm always keen to go back and read those things, like Wind in the Willows. We did that, and like I'd like to just sit down and read those books someday.
Especially like the H.G. I've never read any like the H.G. Wells sci-fi or any of the Robert Louis Stevenson adventure books, which are probably like more up my street than the like more classic dramas of the era. Because who doesn't love adventure? And I'm a child who just needs like serotonin to kick off in his brain every so often. Stuff needs to happen, Ken.
Yes, and in fairness, from what I've seen of adaptations, there's a lot of different acts in this book. You know, there's the before part, as we said, with the tavern. There's when they set sail. There's the mutiny. There's the quest for the treasure. There's the aftermath. So there's a lot of different
bit where
parts.
Miss Piggy's dangling over a cliff.
Of course, that's a classic part of the novel as well.
Mm-hmm. Piggy's design, back to the Muppets. Miss Piggy's design in the early
I just
Muppets.
took off my glasses if you can't hear that.
I don't like it. I'm very much on board with their redesign of Miss Piggy in later years.
Yeah, Miss Piggy's eyes looked very lifeless previously.
Yeah, there's nothing going on. I think it might have been just like Piggy was more of a side character then, whereas like Piggy is the Muppets now. Probably she's gone too far to the other side. There's too much Piggy these days.
Yeah, if you look at Muppets now, she's in like 80% of it.
Yeah, so it's like, whoa, dial back on the Piggy a little. Though someone tweeted that Miss Piggy should be a judge on RuPaul's Drag Race. I'm like, yes. How has that not happened? Citing tweets that I don't remember the names of people who sent them this week. That's
of course,
the theme on this podcast.
Of course. What would be the sketch of RuPaul's Drag Race if you were to do it on the Muppet Show? What would you call it? RuPig's Drag Race? No. I'll workshop it.
I can't realize he had nothing for the show.
Makers wanted to make the film fun
because the original book wasn't.
By creating more exciting action sequences, and because they believed that having the characters wear space helmets and suits would take out the romance of it.
Good call.
The crew created the concept of Ethereum, so that's an outer space filled with atmosphere. They do reference it, but they don't actually go that much into it.
Yeah, it's just basically they can all breathe and it's fine. They do reference the gravity part because the ship has this gravity modulator thing that keeps them on board. But they can just breathe in space. It's fine, and I'm okay with that. Honestly, the whole whoa, we can't breathe. That stuff is who cares? No one watches space stuff for that.
Yeah. And they do kind of explain it away quickly, but they're better off than getting bogged down in lore. It's a kid's film at the end of the day.
And there's a lot of lore in this film anyway. Which, by the way, like the whole premise of Captain Flint being like this dude who had a magic portal who teleported all over the world to rob people blind and disappear into nothing. That rules so much.
I really liked that because it makes sense why he has all this treasure, because he can literally zip in, take it, and disappear again. And I thought that was a cool twist. I also liked the twist on where the treasure was at the core of this planet. So the treasure was the planet. Yeah. It's literally Treasure Planet.
It's the literal Treasure Planet, Ken.
I love how petty Flint was. That like when people try to steal his treasure, he just destroys the planet and destroys the treasure rather than have people take it from him.
And he's just dead there, sitting in bones, waiting for it to go down with them. What if they saw this little tripwire thing and he was like, "Oops, step over it, and then I can plunder all your treasure now, pal." I'm
assuming there were more booby traps. Writer Rob Edwards said it was really challenging to take the classic novel and set it in outer space. They did away with a lot of the traditional science fiction elements. But I think that really benefited the film. They leaned more into the fantasy elements than, I suppose, the 80s science fiction tropes. And as I said, making the ships and the technology more organic looking. It's not so much steampunk, I suppose.
It's just like, flying pirate ships. It's cool.
Or like maps hidden in puzzle balls and stuff like that. So like they have...
Which, by the way, that puzzle ball clearly has some like intricate solution to it that Jim Hawkins just happened to stumble across the first time he held it in his hands.
I think they imply that your man...
savant?
I think they imply that your man showed him before he died.
Is he a savant?
He's a savant. Okay. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, he's 40 years old now. I looked this up. He seems like he's still young to me, but he's been around a long time. He voices Jim Hawkins. I'm going to push back a little bit. I think that he's a bit bland, and he's kind of an archetypal, edgy, I'm doing air quotes, male protagonist in the 90s mold.
Yeah, but I like it. This would have been, third Rock from the Sun is before this, isn't it? So he's a known quantity at this stage, Joseph. I will say his accent kind of veers.
He's like, he does New York for quite a lot of it.
Yeah,
when he's trying to be like confrontational, he's like, "I'm walking here."
Yeah, he veers into New York for bits and then just completely drops it. Which is, I like Jim Hawkins. He's not the most exciting or revelatory character in the world, but it's like I don't think they've delved into dad issues on any of these films yet, have they?
Yeah, I don't think they went that far into that though. Really,
that's literally what the film is about.
Yeah, but
that Silver is a replacement for his father. That's the entire narrative of the film, Ken.
And he's a reluctant replacement because I was going to say he falls for Jim. That makes it sound romantic.
Yeah, but he takes Jim on as his apprentice,
and he goes soft.
He realizes that he cares for Jim, but still betrays Jim. But ultimately, Jim saves him. Actually, he doesn't save Jim. Actually, no, he does save Jim on Treasure Planet. Then so they returns the favor. They save each other, and then he lets him go free, even though he probably shouldn't. I think like that gives the film like it's nothing like that has the same punch that Lilo and Stitch has, but it does give the film a bit of an emotional hook.
Yeah, because again, this is a film with no villain, essentially.
Well, the Silver's still the villain, like undeniably, but he's more of a reluctant villain, or villain with shades of grey, as opposed to like just a straight mustache twirling bad guy, which probably makes him a more interesting villain.
Because he's oscillating between he wants to achieve his lifelong dream of getting all this treasure, but then he comes to care for Jim, as we said.
And like there's the worst version of this film where he just betrays Jim and he's just the bad guy.
And then he gets killed.
And that's just lazy and who cares? And I think the version they go for where like he does betray Jim, he kidnaps them multiple times, guides them to the center of Treasure Planet, but then like somewhat redeems himself, but not fully redeems himself. So like I like that. There's layers there as opposed
Shades
to
of grey, as they say.
Yeah, I always push back in Shades of Grey because it's the thing Vince Russo used to say about things in wrestling, which was just an excuse for all characters being like morally ambiguous and bad instead of characters just having actual different shades and different layers. It should be like an onion, Ken, in that maybe there's something on the outside, but there's more on the inside and it should get deeper as you dig in, as opposed to it should be this moral nothingness where everybody...
So it should be like Shrek.
Yes.
Ogres are like onions.
Ogres are like onions, Ken. That's a DreamWorks film. We're not allowed to mention.
Oh, sorry.
Other than like the Vince Russo wrestling thing where it's like everybody can just be a different character week to week, and that's quote unquote shades of grey when it's just bad writing.
Terry Rossio, who worked on the script, later argued that the filmmakers made a crucial mistake in turning Jim Hawkins into an adolescent teen.
Why?
He said, Treasure Island, the book, is a boy's adventure about a young cabin boy who matches wits with a crew of bloodthirsty pirates. All of the key scenes are made more dramatic by the fact that it's a young kid who is in danger. Treasure Planet made the kid into a young man, which dilutes the drama of all the situations start to finish. Instead of being an amazing and impressive kid, he became a petulant and unimpressive teen.
I disagree.
Yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle on that because I wasn't blown away by the characterization. I wasn't rooting for Jim as much as they wanted me to, but I do think that there is somewhat of a satisfying arc there that he finds a father figure, and also he feels like he's searching for something his entire life that he already had.
Mm-hmm.
So like he goes away to space and he goes after that adventure, but what he really realized was that
the treasure he found was his father surrogate.
No, but like he comes back and like he's content to be with his extended family.
Mm-hmm.
And he does start his career in the space admiral force thing. Sure. But it's just that the thing he was looking for was in front of him the entire time and he had to go away to find that.
Yeah, and Niles was right that he's Niles. I was right that he just had to go to space for a few months to find himself. But the reason I disagree is that if you age Jim Hawkins down, you have to completely rewrite this movie.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Like this is a movie aimed at teenagers, which is the reason Jim Hawkins ends up being a teen, which makes perfect sense. But if you make Jim Hawkins a 9-year-old, you have to completely rewrite this movie.
And it would have to have a villain, I think.
Yeah, it would have to be a completely different film. It wouldn't work if he was a 9-year-old.
On the teen front, there's no love interest for Jim in this film.
Just refreshing.
Yeah, because Clemens and Musker, they tend to go for that trope quite a lot.
Like there is like a love interest between Amelia and Niles. What's Niles' name? Delbert Doppler? He's Niles. Yes. Played, if you don't know why I'm calling him Niles, he's played by David Hyde Pierce of Frasier fame. Yeah. He's Niles.
So they kind of pay off that plot that they usually go for there. They kind of impress each other, they court each other without knowing, and then at the end they have a load of babies. That's like that bit tied off in the if you're ticking off the tropes.
So if like they focus tested it and it's like we need a love interest, that's where they shoved it in, and it's fine. I have no feelings good or bad about Niles and Amelia's love interest here.
I think that would have distracted from the movie because, as we said, I think it's about Jim's growth and the relationship between him and Silver. I think that's the crux of the movie, as you said.
Yeah, that's like the emotional heart. It's the thing that makes this film interesting compared to Atlantis. It's the thing Atlantis doesn't really have, where Atlantis is actually the opposite, and Atlantis ends up being that love story, and it's a little meh at the end. Yeah. Whereas this, it's like Jim has a very separate, distinct arc. It's a kind of story they haven't told yet, which I think is interesting and makes it unique. And as I said, it doesn't have that Lilo and Stitch punch, but it does have something that these films haven't told yet. So that it has that going for it. I like that.
Do you have any more thoughts on the story, Gar?
I think the cast are very good. I know you hate Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but
I suppose I just think he's serving a bit of an archetype here, but he does imbue it with a sense of life and attitude. Like he fills the brief well, but I just think there's no new ground there.
So it's not really except for the wandering accent, it's not really the performance you have an issue with, more like the just the what the character is meant to be.
Yeah.
Emma Thompson, very good as Amelia.
Yes, a strong female character, which, we don't always see in these films.
Even though she gets shot and nearly dies.
Yeah, but then she comes through in the end.
All right. David Hyde Pierce is playing Niles. He's just Niles. But, have you seen any Frasier?
I did watch quite a lot of Frasier, yeah.
So, yeah, he's Niles.
Yeah, he's played Niles for most of his career, in fairness.
Which, why not? Once you find that one gig. Actually, the one thing I really didn't like about this film, and it's telling we haven't mentioned the character.
Oh, Martin Short?
Yeah, Martin Short as Ben. Don't like it at all.
And it's one of those things, like, he's that device in the film that advances the plot, leads them to the treasure. He does a lot of exposition as well. Mm-hmm. But it's one of those things, like, we're quite far into the film when he comes in.
Yeah.
And it just seems needless. And
I feel like you could have rewritten this film very easily and taken him out.
Yeah.
Like, they could have, like, if you just took out the entire Ben section and had him just find the little hole where they put the thing in and it reveals the thing.
Or you could even find some kind of drone or something that doesn't talk. But
no, you could take Ben out entirely. You could take that entire section out and Jim finds that hole, opens the door, which he doesn't do with Ben's help. And, like, they can work out that the thing is self-destructing without freaking Ben being like, I got my memories back. It's about to blow up. I think that would become fairly self-evident quite quickly. I think they'd work out what's happening there. So, I don't like the performance. I think it's overbearing.
I think if we're talking about the Clements and Musker formula, that's the bit for the kids, along with Morph as well.
No, I was going to say Morph. I actually, that as the...
Morph is a parrot, which I thought was quite clever.
Yeah, as a thing. I didn't get that.
Morph is a parrot, Gary. Jim Silver has a parrot.
That I did include.
John Silver, sorry.
That makes me like it even more. But I think Morph is fine as a thing for the kids. Morph is a nice little side character. He's not talking, but he's the goofy...
space parrot.
Space parrot, yes. Whereas Ben, I don't like the performance. I think he's really annoying and really overbearing. And it feels like a Robin Williams parody. It feels like they wanted Robin Williams to do Ben, couldn't get him, and it's like, all right, Martin Short, you go do Robin Williams instead, I guess.
Yeah, he has that kind of manic energy, but it does feel like a parody, doesn't it? Even though he's probably going longer than Robin Williams, so maybe it's the other way around. Robin Williams is inspired by him, but I think Robin Williams eclipsed him.
Yeah.
So it does feel like, and I suppose
it feels like oh god, this is what Genie could have been in less sure hands.
Yeah, but in the chronology of our experience, Genie came first. So even if Martin Short was an inspiration for Robin Williams, perhaps,
nonetheless, he did an inferior version of a very similar routine in a Disney film.
I can't really remember the name of the actor that played John Silver, but he's South African, I think.
Brian Murray.
Yeah, it's somewhere between kind of it's basically an Irish accent.
Yeah.
And I found it a bit distracting at times.
Well, I was like, oh, an Irish actor. It's like, oh, no, he's not an Irish actor.
Yeah.
Cultural appropriation.
But, like, is pirate Irish?
Well, like yar, that I can see why someone would translate that into a roughly Irish accent, because I think
it does have an Irish lilt to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's like a shanty lilt to it that I think kind of matches our lyrical sense of wordplay, and
well, at least what Americans think our lyrical sense of wordplay is.
Yeah, I have a very lyrical voice.
We don't talk like that anymore, Gary.
Oh, faith and begorra, diddly-eye, here we go. I can see why someone would connect those dots. Nice if it's got an Irish actor to do it, but sure. Who would they have gotten? Liam Neeson?
No, what's his name? No, was he already dead? No, he wouldn't have, well, he would have been dead by then, but when it was produced, he wouldn't be dead. Who was the original Dumbledore again? Why can't I remember?
Yeah. Oh, God.
Richard Harris.
Yes, Richard Harris.
Yeah.
But he has too much gravitas. What's his name? Brendan the Guard.
Brendan Gleeson.
Ah, yeah. Brendan Gleeson. It would have been Brendan Gleeson.
Okay, so one more note I have in the story here. The escape in the finale is thrilling, and I think it's the best use of 3D in the movie, where Jib is surfing through the debris and the falling things to get to the
portal first to change it so they can all get through to safety. Yeah. Which, how did they know that the explosion wouldn't just blow up the planet they went to?
Yeah, it did follow them through, but
I guess the gate closed then when they went through. I like this film, and I watched. This is the first one we didn't watch together, Ken.
I know, in the 43 run episode of the podcast, it's the first one that we did not watch together. I felt betrayed.
Yeah, well, but I watched it over a day ago now, so I've been stewing on it, and I'm like, the more I think about it, it's like, I like this film.
I think for me, I watched it when I was supposed to be working, so shock and awe.
You probably shouldn't admit that on a podcast.
Yeah. But
you should edit that out. Ken, you admitted on a podcast that you were watching movies while working?
Yeah, nobody listens to this podcast. It's fine.
Don't you have colleagues that listen to this podcast?
I do, but they're not going to tell on me. So I was a bit distracted. I was paying attention to it. It wasn't on in the background, but I feel as if, I think you hit the nail on the head there, where I compared it less favorably to Atlantis, which I feel like I enjoyed more. So I feel like it was retreading the same ground, even though it's probably in development for longer. And
it's just archetypally, it's a ragtag group of people who don't get along, some of which who will betray the others, searching for this lost thing that has never been found. They find it, and then some horrible calamity ensues. There you go. They're both archetypally the same film. One is more of a love interest side, the other somebody searching for a father figure. I think the father figure side is more interesting. But again, if you'd watch this film before you'd watch Atlantis, I think you'd like this film more than Atlantis, and vice versa.
But if you take it in isolation, I think it had a lot going for it. But I think the fact that this was 17 years in the making, and I think if a film's in development for that long,
it's got to be good or else.
But it's also maybe sometimes it just becomes very far away from what it was supposed to be in the beginning. I think if they made this in the 90s, it would have been maybe a less visually sophisticated film, but at the same time, I think it would have had the heart and maybe some of the songs that
it would have had more. This film does have original songs.
It does. And moving on quickly to the songs, Gar, the musical score was composed by James Newton Howard, a Disney go-to guy at the time, it seems, while a couple of the songs were written and performed by John Resnick from the Goo Goo Dolls.
Ah, that makes sense. Because I heard these songs, that's like, oh, it's the Goo Goo Dolls. And then I looked it up and it's like, oh, it's not. But I never clicked through on John Resnick's Wikipedia page to be like, oh, he's the guy behind the the Goo Goo Dolls. That makes more sense. Because I was like, those are some Goo Goo Dolls ass songs.
Yeah, and that was their peak time, I suppose. Actually, City of Angels was their peak, and that was about 4 years before this. So the songs were also written by B.B. Mack, but both songs were performed by John Resnick on the soundtrack. The same 70-30 law for animation for the film was applied to the music, so sci-fi music sounds mixed with traditional music, fiddles.
I don't get that at all.
A Celtic influence.
I actually think it's 100% traditional. I enjoy the score. I actually think it's very good and has it's a generic ass butt rock song with your generic ass.
I think they were very ill-fitting compared to the score.
I don't know. I think it works for who they're trying to make Jim Hawkins seem. I think because one of the songs plays over a montage of Jim Hawkins and Silver bonding, and then another plays over the credits. So really, there's only one song in the actual film itself, and I think that song is well deployed. I think it fits who they're trying to tell you Jim Hawkins is meant to be.
Yeah, I get it, but it's just, if you're talking about the fiddle music and the Celtic influence, and
which only comes in every now and again. There's really not that much of that in the film.
Yeah, but the old feel of the film, it's 70% old, 30% new, if you know what I mean. Those pop songs just felt a little bit out of place.
Well, there's only one of them technically.
Yeah, that's just me. They're enjoyable songs, and we will hear one of them.
And Nicole has to do it.
Yeah.
Nicole doing butt rock.
She did not enjoy it.
No, I don't think butt rock comes naturally to her.
But you mentioned the score there, Gar. Funnily enough, Howard also did Dinosaur, and I thought especially the bit, the journey of the egg, I don't think that's the exact name of that piece, but the bit at the start of Dinosaur shares a lot of DNA with a lot of the score here.
Yeah, it's a fairly traditional film score.
Sweeping adventure.
Yeah, I think it has a really good central theme, which is the reason I like it.
And the thing was, it didn't really stick with me, but then when you played it earlier, I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like and it's like, yeah, it's a nice little central theme.
You can take that and fit it into 20 other movies and it will work.
Yeah.
But it does rouse the blood a bit,
It's a nice little catchy jingle there for this film. Yeah, I like the score. It's one of the few scores that I've gone back and actually listened to in the following days.
Cara, there's not much here in terms of the legacy of this film. It was nominated for Best Animated Feature at the 75th Academy Awards. This is a relatively new category, and it's not really a barometer of quality, really. More just filling a shortlist.
Yeah, but because so few animated films, even today, so few animated films can be on a major level are made year to year, that basically,
if you have a category with 5 nominees, you're going to get in there probably.
Yeah, if you make a film, you'll probably get in there unless the film is garbage.
As you noted, Gar, a planned franchise with sequel, direct-to-video releases and TV show were cancelled due to the financial disappointment of the film.
By the way, it lost to a Spirited Away. It was released the same year, of course, as Lilo and Stitch.
Yeah.
So even in compared to other Disney films, it didn't have a hope of beating Lilo and Stitch.
Yeah, it's quite down there in the pecking order.
Other nominees that year, by the way, Ken, Ice Age, which of course went on to be bizarrely a film that kept on making $1 billion every time they made a new one.
Yeah,
which I like the original Ice Age, but every time you'd be like, oh, they're releasing Ice Age 4, who wants that? Then you check the box office gross, it's like, oh, it made $1 billion.
But while I think that this cynical approach to animation is kind of sad, that you can churn things out and kids will watch it, I do think that if you release an animated film at the right time, time, you have somewhat of a captive audience, so you're always going to make money. It's like you're bringing the kids to the cinema, you only have a few choices,
Yeah, and of course, the other film it was nominated against was Spirit Stallion of Cimarron.
In fairness, that's one of my favourite DreamWorks films. I do like that one.
Jeff Katzenberg desperately wanted that one to win, didn't he?
Yeah, so overall, Gar, I'm maybe a bit lower on Treasure Planet than you. I think it's fine. I think you'll watch it, you won't love it or hate it, and you'll never think about it again once it's over.
I liked it surprisingly more than I thought, especially because, as I said, I've seen it, unlike Atlantis or Dinosaur or Fantasia 2000, and I didn't remember loving it when I first watched it. And to be fair, like when I watched it again, I'm like, I vaguely remember this, but I don't remember like the minute-to-minute details. So clearly, it didn't leave that much of an impression on me. But when I rewatched it, I quite like it. As I said, it does suffer from being so close to Atlantis and so similar to Atlantis. But if you were to not watch Atlantis and you would just sit down and watch this film, I think what you would get is a very enjoyable, solid adventure film with a nice little story there about a father figure, a good score, some great action, and it's actually quite pretty. So, yeah. And it has Niles doing Niles. So if you're a big Frasier fan and you want more Frasier, he's just doing Niles. So
I think you're right. The sum of its parts do create a decent and enjoyable film. But my point is, like, it's not one of those ones like, oh, I'll sit down and like, what will I watch? And even out of the ones we've talked about most recently, the ones that are lesser known or during this period almost forgotten, I'd go back to Atlantis. Of course, I'd go back to Lilo and Stitch. I wouldn't go back to Fantasia 2000. And I think
What about Emperor's New Groove, Ken?
Again,
would you go back to that?
It's down the list for me, and so is this. So I think it's ahead of Emperor's New Groove, but it's not one of my favourites. It hasn't captured my imagination and heart, Gar.
I said more love for this than Atlantis, less love for Emperor's New Groove. That's the takeaway from this podcast. More people should enjoy these fun adventure films that are better than Black Cauldron. They are the legacy of Black Cauldron fulfilled, Ken.
Yes, the trilogy complete. All right, you Disney dogs, we've nearly come to the end of our show for another week. Resident musical expert Nicole is coming up in just a few minutes with a song from this week's movie. It's the perfect end to the show every week, so be sure to stick around for that after the credits. New episodes of Magic by Design drop every Monday, where all magical podcasts are downloaded. Stop by our website at magicbydesign.buzzsprout.com to find a full list of podcast platforms. We are literally everywhere: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, you name it, we're on it.
Very solid Chris Traeger impression there, Ken.
What?
You were like, we are literally everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Ken fell into Chris Traeger without even realizing. God.
It's so ingrained in me that I don't even notice anymore.
Stop pooping.
Stop watching Disney films. We are also active on all your favorite social media platforms. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Magic by Design Pod, on Twitter at Magic Design Pod, and on the Insta at Magic by Design Pod. If you're liking the vibe of our weekly Disney movie breakdowns and want to support the show, please do consider giving us a review on your podcast platform of choice. 5 stars, please. You can also share the podcast on your socials or even recommend the show to a fellow Disney fan. If you give us a 5-star review, we will send you a PDF of a treasure map to find some bountiful beauty of your own, which may or may not be a placemat from a themed restaurant. Who knows?
I want a placemat from a themed restaurant.
Exactly, Gar. So give the podcast 5 stars.
Then I can be like, find the thing. But what if you can't work it out?
Well, then you don't deserve the treasure.
That's true. Those mazes can be hard to figure out.
We'll be back next week at the same time, same place, with a review of Disney's 44th animated feature, Brother Bear.
Brother Bear. Back to a Phil Collins movie. Yeah.
But until then, stay safe and remember, you got the makings of greatness in you, but you've got to take the helm and chart your own course. Now then, Nicole is here to close out the show with a space shanty, Always Know Where You Are from Treasure Planet. Thanks for listening, and take us away, Miss Nicole.
Hello there, my Disney fanatics. It's me, your musical correspondent Nicole, coming to you live from my bedroom. This week we're adventuring to Treasure Planet. The score for this film was composed by familiar name John Newton Howard. 3 songs appear in this movie. I'm Still Here, or Jim's theme, is written and performed by Goo Goo Dolls frontman John Resnick. This single was released by Resnick separate from the Goo Goo Dolls and was a moderate success in the pop charts. Resnick also wrote the song Always Know Where You Are for the movie and sung it for the film, while BB Mac performed the song on the soundtrack. It's said that John Resnick was chosen to write the songs as he could easily relate to the rebel with a cause angst experienced by main character Jim. The 3rd song that appears in the film is an old version of Yo Ho, A Pirate's Life for Me, performed by Martin Short. This is uncredited and doesn't appear in the soundtrack. Unfortunately, the music made for this movie was not nominated for any award after its release. This week, I'm taking a look at Always Know Where You Are. Bear with, listeners. This is a song in a super low male key, so I go between 2 octaves of my voice to make it sound okay, and the backing track is pretty atrocious. Still, I hope you enjoy it. It's good to see the sun and feel this place I never thought would feel like home. Now I'm forever far away, and I always thought I'd end up here alone. Somehow the world has changed, and I've come home to give you back the things they took from you. And I feel you now, I'm not alone. I'll always know where you are. And when I see myself, I always know where you are. Where you are. And I felt something that was always there. Sometimes it's gotta hurt before you feel. But now I'm strong and I won't kneel, except to thank who's watching over me. And somehow I feel so strong, and I've begun to be the one I never thought I'd be. And I feel you now, I'm not alone. I'll always know where you are. And when I see myself, I always know where you are. Where you are. Now it's all so clear, and I believe that everything's been opened up to me. And I feel you now, I'm not alone. I'll always know where you are. And when I see myself, I always know where you are. And when I feel the sun, I always know where you are. And when I see myself, I always know where you are. Where you are.